This photograph of an old World War II airplane is a B-25. The photograph is called, as I'm sure you know, B-25 Bomber Crew +1. That's referring to the dog, of course. The original photograph started off that I, was looking for an airplane basically just like this, sort of classic vintage World War II bomber, restored, not too big. I still wanted to have it kind of human in scale, which I believe it does and is beautiful. And the background for that is that I finally met a guy who knew some other guy who owns a B-25 bomber, which was really great. It's out in, the San Fernando Valley in a smaller airport here in Los Angeles. And I was talking to the owner and some of his crew about the whole idea about doing the shot, and they were pretty interested and open to the idea. And we wanted to photograph it originally at a local airport. The airport directors had basically told me that it'll cost $800 to do this picture. I explained that, it's like a beautiful piece of American history, and it's very nostalgic, and it's all kept flying with volunteer crews, in addition to like the private monies of the man who owns it. I myself would be wearing my artist hat, and it's basically a piece of art. We're not doing a commercial for soda pop, and is there any way they can cut us a little slack? And the guy looks at the big book of rules and flips it open to page 37, goes halfway down and goes, nope, see, there it is right here, $800. So that's not going to work. So had to figure out some other way to do the shot. Eventually I had to wait for the plane to fly somewhere else because I can't afford to pay for the gas for it to go somewhere. 2 or 3 months later, the airplane flew up to a place called Eagle Field, which is in Central California. They were having a 50-year anniversary of the airport itself. Eagle Field during World War II was a training base for B-25 bombers, and they took this airplane up to it. There was another B-25 up there. There was a bunch of guys with these vintage Jeeps you could see that had been restored, and I even borrowed a 500-pound bomb from some guy who happened to be there with a 500-pound bomb. That worked out, really great. In the photograph is actually the crew itself in this picture on the ground. The way the aircraft and the systems and everything works is that the owner, it would cost millions and millions to keep this aircraft flying for all these years. What he does is he has a volunteer crew who works on the aircraft, and they get to go fly in the aircraft as basically payment. So there's, like sheet metal guys and hydraulics guys, systems guys, electronics guys. The crew chief himself for the whole airplane is sitting in the Jeep on the right-hand side of the picture. And they all work on the aircraft and then fly as crew when they fly to different locations around Southern California. Basically, the idea was originally I was going to have the entire crew in the photograph itself. And my thinking would be that one of them would be on a cell phone as sort of a hint that it's not an old photograph but a modern photograph, and not trying to pretend to be an old photograph. But I think the deal is when you mix 600 people, a live band, good food, sort of vintage styling and clothing and alcohol, well, everybody's having a pretty good time. The only one who wasn't really drinking was myself and the dog, I suspect. And these 3 guys on the ground in the photograph as part of the crew were so gracious to volunteer their time. Also, as opposed to having a good time, they were working with me taking a very difficult photograph at night. The one guy in the bombardier section was not part of the crew at all. He just happened to be walking by to come out and see, like, what are we doing out on the runway? And, he happened to be wearing the vintage clothing, so that was perfect. We grabbed the guy, chucked his mixed drink, got rid of his little piece of cake, threw him in the bombardier section and said, hold still. So I included him too. And that's basically the story of the airplane. Oh, the last little piece, the dog. We did try to photograph the dog originally in the front seat, early on, but she was much too worked up. Every time we'd take a picture, she'd move, and I can't do both sides of her. It was kind of messy. Eventually, toward the very, very end of the evening, we tried again around 11:30 at night. And by this time, she was so exhausted, she just fell asleep in the front seat, and we shot her very quickly. And that's how I got the dog, too. Anyway, that's pretty much the story of the B-25 Heavenly Body.